So, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, hyvät ystävät. Jeff had several thousand years of perspective, several hundred years. I'm limiting myself only a 100-year perspective. In his excellent and inspiring presentation, he did not mention a single time words a nation or a state. My approach is to discuss and analyze the role of small states and nationalism in Europe. And I already say that my main message, my main thesis here is that nationalism is not a threat, but the strength of Europe. You read a lot today in newspapers, television, articles, books that present rising nationalism as the main threat of Europe. I think that is a misconception. We have to define what is the role of nationalism. Currently, I am writing a biography of the founding father of Finland's independence, Pehr Evind Svinhufvudi. He had a remarkable career. First, he was the first speaker of the Finnish one-chamber democratic parliament in 1907 for several years, under the Russian rule, Finnish autonomy. Then he was sent to Siberia because of his opposition to Russian rule. He spent there 2.5 years. In 54 degrees cold in winter times. He came back in 1917 and became the prime minister, first prime minister of independent Finland, declaring the independence. During the celebrations of the independence in January 1918, there was a socialist military revolution in Finland. He was underground, almost killed. He could escape occupied Helsinki. After the winning the civil war, he became the first head of state of Finland in May 1918. Then he retired from politics, but with the rise of right-wing radicalism in Europe and also in Finland, he became prime minister and president of Finland. And he had to suppress another revolution, this time from his own ranks, right-wing radicalism. In 1932, Finland was on the brink of becoming a semi-dictatorship like most of Europe. And only through his determination to democracy, Finland stayed a democratic country. And I think one of the main reasons for the survival in the long run. Later. Here I have a picture of members of the European Union slightly modified on the part of Finland. We discuss a lot the question that 1908 Finland became a Grand Duchy of Russia. Had it not been the case, would the map of Europe look like that? The key question here is that on what foundation small nations have become independent in Europe? Oh, I can change myself, please. The big question is that how was an independent state of a small nation, 2.5–3 million people, become an independent state? Was it an administrative arrangement or was it product of ideas, especially nationalistic movement all over Europe? I've been in a minority in my country to present the idea that Finland would have become independent one day, even if had it stayed part of Sweden. The big event and question is the dissolution of empires around 100 years ago. From the small states perspective, you can ask whether the small states Europe is a product of nationalistic movements in these small states or is it a result of collapsing empires, leftovers of the empires? The empires couldn't keep together, they collapsed for some reason or another, and on the map of Europe was left tens of small nations. It started already. Sweden was an old empire, Norway declared independent, Russian Empire collapsed, Habsburg Empire collapsed, German small empire collapsed, United Kingdom experience. We are now celebrating the 100 years of Easter Rebellion in Ireland this year, 1916. Ottoman Empire, huge empire, little by little collapse, and Turkey is the result. The question is that why did these big empires collapse? I do not compare European Union as an empire, but I think it faces the key question how to combine international organization with nationalism. All these huge multinational heterogeneous empires of the past have collapsed. Nationalism has been declared outdated several times in the past, and again it comes back, and national states, small and big, show their strength. I think the only alternative is the British Empire. Actually, I long time ago wrote my doctoral dissertation of British foreign policy, and I was very interested in one person called Edward Wood. He was in 3 roles in British Empire. He was Viceroy of India as Lord Irwin in early 1930s. Then decline of empire. He was the foreign minister of United Kingdom in 1939 as Lord Halifax. And again, the decline of British Empire. He was ambassador to United States, being there when United Nations was established. From Viceroy to India to ambassador to United States, and creating this Commonwealth, British Commonwealth. Now they're voting in Australia about the flag, whether they still keep the flag. But the idea that nationalism has broken the empires in the past, and as I said, my main message and thesis is that the main challenge for European Union is how to tackle nationalism, which is the strength, which has been the strength of small and big nations to keep together, develop their values. What is forgotten is these old-fashioned threats to small states, nation states. They are socialism, socialist revolutions, radical right wing. Actually, remember that Nazis were called national socialists, combining ultra-nationalism and socialism. Very strong state role in economy, all affairs of life, ending in dictatorship. Fascism also authoritarian system, anti-democratic. Dictatorship, civil wars, Holocaust, repression of minorities. These are the threats still there, especially old-style imperialism from a Russian side, trying to change the borders by force. The story of small states in Europe is very, very fascinating. As I said, the first wave was after the First World War. And then, like in the Star Wars, the Imperium strikes back. In the Second World War, Soviet Union, Americans divided Europe. Cold War, two spheres of interest, a diminished role of states, nation states, and then after the Cold War, again, emergence of small states. The challenge European Union is facing now is that is it trying to become a great power in some old-fashioned sense where the role of small states, nation states, nationalism is being put aside. And I think that it is a mistake to try to do that. And that's why I think then discussing European values, the soul of Europe, one aspect should be to discuss how do we combine healthy nationalism with democracy, human rights, Christian values, but nation state, national identities as a very, very strong forces in people's minds. How do we combine this reality of life with the absolute necessary international cooperation? Part of this exercise is to discuss, we should discuss what do we mean by nation building. The previous presentation was more or less that the ideological building education of Europeans, not to mention nations. My thesis is more or less that through nation building with international cooperation, we perhaps get further that people feel threatened if their identity as Estonians, Finns, French, British, Germans are threatened. They are not, I believe, willing to give up their national identities, but they are very pragmatic in all the positive sides of European cooperation. So I'm also a member of the Finland's 100 years anniversary committee, and I see that as a chance and obligation to discuss the role of small states, the role of democracy, the identity of small nations, the future perspective of small nations in Europe, in European Union, that we want to celebrate 100 years of independence, but we are not willing to establish a museum of national independence. Thank you.